Nigeria's energy and natural resources sector holds immense potential for driving economic development and fostering sustainability. However, it also faces a myriad of challenges that demand strategic interventions and robust policy frameworks to overcome. On the show today, we will be examining these challenges and delve into the interventions proposed by the Energy and Natural Resources subcommittees of President Tinubu's Policy Advisory Council that seeks to transform the sectors and, of course, position Nigeria for a prosperous and sustainable future. And so this morning, oil and gas lawyer Chukwuma Osuji is joining me to unpack this. He's a partner at Olaniwun Ajayi LP. It's nice to have you around, Chukwuma. Join us on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me once again.
So this is how we're going to start. I'd like you to do an overview of what currently obtains in Nigeria's energy sector. What are the potentials? What is the modus operandi? And what are the challenges? And how does it thrive and get through everyday activities?
Okay, well, basically, just to sort of summarize the point, we have one word that describes the energy sector is potential. For those who understand the dynamics of the sector, whether you're looking at the upstream or the midstream or the downstream, we have significant potentials. So in terms of, we have the resources, we have oil, we have the gas. But where we then have had the challenge over the years has pretty much been how to then transition from that state of just, potentials to actually utilizing and ramping up what we can do with oil and gas. And pretty much for a lot of people, that sector is not a standalone sector in itself. Apart from being the mainstay of the economy, it should actually be a sector that should incentivize and stimulate other sectors in Nigeria. But unfortunately, we've not been able to get there. The journey has started, but we've not quite gotten there. So if you compare Nigeria, for example, with a few other countries who started at the same time, or even after we've started, pretty much might not even have the same resources that we have, you will then begin to see that in terms of the numbers, we are not quite where we're supposed to be, both in terms of crude oil production, gas production, and the ability to leverage on those two resources to build other aspects of the economy. So we are on a journey, but we are not nearly where we should be at the moment. So that, for me, just sort of summarizes where we are in the energy sector at the moment.
All right, you talked about the fact that this particular sector has a lot of potential. And looking at what the PAC recommendations are on how to unlock the country's potential on all sides, it is looking at increasing the refining capacity to about 1.36 million barrels per day, increase mineral production to about 185 million tons, as it were, and also increase gas production to 3.5 billion cubic feet, while also increasing oil production capacity to about 4 million barrels per day. Just to corroborate what you said, that there's huge potential and the possibility to scale up the operations of this particular sector. But then I'd like you to be very critical about the challenges, because you said that there's been a big issue, a big impediment as regards translating the potential into what can be seen, what can be verifiable, what can be handled and experienced, as it were. So what are those challenges? What are those bottlenecks? And what do you think can be done to overcome these hurdles?
Okay, so I'll approach it this way. I'll just try to summarize and deconstruct it into, I will talk about the upstream and the midstream and then perhaps downstream. For the upstream, soon after we came out from the issues with COVID-19 and the entire lockdown, we ought to have had a rebound. But we then rolled from those challenges straight into a period of 3 or 4 years where we had this abysmal state of insecurity in that sector. And I'm talking about the upstream. So our production plummeted to almost negative figures. The losses were huge, if I could use that word. Vandalism, diversion, lack of accountability, the numbers just weren't coming in. So that insecurity issues sort of was a stranglehold to the upstream sector. In addition to that, this came at the same time where the whole world was talking about energy transitioning, and people were beginning to look at other investment destinations other than Nigeria. So the funds weren't coming in, the financing to develop more assets weren't coming in. But the little that we were producing was now having significant challenges in terms of the insecurity and the inability to be able to sort of produce and evacuate those products. So the upstream sector was in a pretty poor shape for a while. So that has been there. Thankfully, that has been addressed, and as you can see, our numbers have ramped up significantly from what we had last year, and even at the moment, the predictions that it's going to ramp up even better. So production is better, and that's largely stemmed from the intervention mechanisms adopted by the government to address the issues largely around insecurity. The financing, those are long-term discussions, not in place at the moment, but once the insecurity issues have been sorted out, maybe and thankfully one can then begin to then have more conversations around how to get in more financing. On the mainstream, I'll speak about the refineries. As you all know, the Dangote refinery is almost on stream, projected to start full production maybe perhaps the end of the year or maybe next year. We're not quite sure. At the same time, the government is working on rehabilitating the Kodako refinery and a few other refineries. And then you then have a few modular refineries that have been working over the past few years. Production has been small for the modular refineries, so you don't really hear a lot about them, but a good number of the modular refineries are doing quite well. So what you then see, the challenges that has typically bedeviled refining sector, and I'll move away from government-owned refineries because that's a different kettle of fish in itself. For the modular refinery sector in quote, it wasn't really about the funding, but it was about what you call the value chain effect. So if you speak to most financiers, they will tell you midstream projects, although they are viable and critical, but at the same time, they are significantly dependent on being able to have steady, uninterrupted supply of feedstock from the upstream. So when you then have an upstream sector that is bedeviled with a lot of interruptions and inability to produce and to evacuate the product, then that means the feedstock to the refineries will be cut short. So a lot of financiers were willing to touch refinery products. So even for those who are willing to do so, some of them will require you to either be in a sort of a partnership or a very close collaboration with somebody or others that have upstream assets. And that's pretty much just to guarantee the feedstock. Now, in addition to that, there was now the issue of the pricing of the downstream end. Because after the refined products have been produced, at what prices are you going to sell? So thankfully, over the last couple of years, there've been sort of the regulation for diesel and fuels. But PMS at the time was still regulated in terms of the price. So the pricing might also have driven some of those conversations into that sort of negative space that I mentioned, where in addition to the fact that the constraints coming from the upstream, people were then concerned about the fact that if you then, the economics just won't be right for them to continue to produce. So those constraints were there. Then, of course, in the downstream sector hasn't really done so badly, to the extent to which a couple of downstream products sort of enjoy largely deregulated prices, so they were pretty much okay. It was largely on the PMS side, which I think we can talk about later in this program, where we then saw the challenges and, of course, know what has unfolded over the last couple of months and the discussions that are currently ongoing. So those pretty much are the challenges across the sectors. On the LNG side, thankfully, NLNG has been a Nigeria's champion as far as I'm concerned. NLNG has done absolutely well. In terms of, for me, NLNG model should be a model that should be adopted for most of the operating assets for me. And they've done hugely well and they continue to produce, not just for exports, which has been very useful, but even for LPG production, which they've channeled to the domestic markets to sort of curb the volumes we were importing. So LNG hasn't done so badly, but there's still additional work required for CNG production and rollout, more LNG production and rollout, and more LPG production and rollout. So we hopefully, maybe with some of a few more policies and stuff, we can then begin to see some of these guys begin to do more work.
All right. Earlier on, you said that the government has come up with different interventions, and that has helped to change or turn around the fortunes of the sector, and you're beginning to see appreciable numbers, as it were. I'd like to ask if the Petroleum Industry Act was instrumental in achieving this, because some people have said that the implementation of that particular act that was signed by the past administration has not really impacted well on the sector. Some have said that, it has in a modest way, but then more still needs to be done. So I'd like to get your own assessment also of how the PIA has helped in this discussion.
Okay, on the PIA, coincidentally, I was part of those who were involved in the drafting of the PIA, I think as early as 2007 or 2008. And I don't recall at the time, and even now, Professor Yinko Morogo that I worked with used to say, Legislation does not bring the changes you need. What laws and regulations do is to set a framework for the changes to then occur. So the passage of the PIA itself will not and cannot be a magic wand that will suddenly translate the industry to a viable industry. It really doesn't work that way. What legislation does to first and foremost is to introduce certainty. So the operators, other stakeholders, and more importantly, investors have a good understanding of what the operating environment is likely to look at, what the regulatory regime is likely to look at, and more importantly, what the fiscal regime will look like. On the basis of that, they can then go back, crunch the numbers, and then now decide, okay, I can invest, and this is what I'm likely to get out in the next 5, 10 to 15 years. So it's about that certainty. It's about having a defined structure. And thankfully, the PIA sort of now has a robust defined structure, particularly in the areas of midstream gas, wholesale supply and wholesale retail of both crude and natural gas products. So that certainty has been introduced. So we won't see the changes immediately. For those who thought passage of the PIA would be a magic wand, it doesn't work that way. But gradually, what will then happen is the market will then begin to react to both the opportunities that have been thrown up, and more importantly, the certainty of we now understand over the next couple of years how will we continue to operate and what the fiscal regimes will look like. So I think it's still a bit too early to judge the PIA too harshly. With time, we can then begin to see people begin to tap into the structure. So yes, there hasn't nothing fantastic might have happened immediately, but with time, it will begin to see those changes that we're looking for.
All right, talking about a very refined structure, that is what the policy that has been brought forward is hoping to achieve. And it is said to practically segment those policies into different areas. That's about 100 days, 8 months, and 3 years. But then I'd like you to look at the recommendations by the PAC and tell us which particular ones actually catch your fancy. And of course, tell us why. And are there other recommendations that you say are a bit off the top, maybe overzealous and probably unnecessary, that you think should be stricken out?
Okay, let me put it this way. For me personally, I like the fact that there is a plan. Because he who fails to plan, it's popularly said, has planned to fail. The fact that there is a plan is a good thing in itself. The fact that it didn't take 4 months, 6 months, or even a month to see that plan is a good thing in itself. What does having a plan so early on the outset of this administration tell you? It means that before this time, the people that came up with that plan have been working behind the lines. They would have done the studies, they would have looked at the dynamics and identified the challenges and then proposed recommendation to handle those challenges. Rightly or wrongly, all might not be well, a few might have challenges, but at least there is a plan. And I like, as I said earlier, in addition to the passage of laws, a plan means certainty. It means people can then begin to see what does this government stand for? What are we to expect in the next? So they have short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans. You can see it. So you have a direction. Not only do you then have a direction, you have a checklist and a marker on the basis of which you can then begin to evaluate what the government has done in the short, medium, and long term. Say, okay, we are performing, we are not performing, these are the areas to change. Now, as to the areas that tickle my fancy, or the areas that you think, the contentious issue of subsidy removal, I personally think subsidies were long overdue for removal. A few people might debate about the timing, about the fact whether it could have occurred beginning or end of June. But for me, it's something that was long overdue for removal. And if government is committed and dedicated in walking the talk, and I mean ensuring that the savings from the subsidy will be channeled to other critical sectors, it's something that I think the industry will benefit from. I'm also excited about what's happening in relation to forex. But the immediate implications is that you then begin to see prices will go up. And I'll give you a very simple example. For those who are a bit familiar with the power sector, one of the key components in terms of the price of the tariffs is what is known as the MITO. The MITO sets out the pricing template, and the exchange rate is one of the components of the MITO. So to the extent to which we have then seen that Naira has imports floated, and I think the CPN has come out recently to say it's not a total float, it's sort of a partial float. But that means that pricing component into the MITO will be impacted. So you can then see, and I think the feelers are beginning to come out, that the prices might go up. So, of course, the citizens, no one is happy about this, because we know Nigeria's earning power is something that one cannot write all about. And you
So
have a lot of
Chukwuma,
people.
yes,
So sorry.
Chukwuma, sorry to cut you. Sorry to cut you in right there. So now that
Yeah.
we are seeing that the prices of PMS has gone up, and of course the citizens will be the ones to bear the brunt by having to pay more. Do you think it would have been better for the government to come up with several initiatives to cushion the effect so that it doesn't become so unbearable for the people and the consumers? Because as we see it now, people tend to pay over 300% of what they usually pay to buy PMS, as it were, to buy this product. And that would also affect cost of production and businesses. Prices of goods will go up. And that's going to be a big issue, if it's not already a big issue for so many people, most especially the ordinary man on the street that need to make do with this particular commodity. So don't you think it would have been nicer if the government had come up with plans to mitigate the effects? Because, of course, it's a big challenge.
You're absolutely right. The mitigation would have been very desirable. But I think I see almost as a chicken and egg situation, because the narrative appears to be, yes, those mitigants and palliatives are necessary. And I think the government has actually even identified a few of the palliatives that might be suggested to cushion some of the effects. But those palliatives need to be funded. So I think that we fell into a very difficult situation where government was saying at the moment, we pretty much don't have additional spare cash to play with. We need to take out the subsidies, then we can free up additional cash. Then with the additional cash, we can then inject into the economy, and then we can then roll out the palliatives. I know what we would have wanted, and I mean Nigerians, particularly the common man on the street, would have been for the palliative to be rolled out first before the subsidies were taken out. But I think, and I'm not trying to vote with for the government, because I don't work with the government, but I think based on what we have heard, it appears to have been a situation where the funds were simply not there to be able to fund those palliatives. And you're talking about a federation with 36 states and over 700 local governments. So that means the palliatives have to be rolled out at the federal level and also at the state level, meaning that the state governments also need to be involved. So I think it was a question of, we need to free up the funds first, then we can then reject into that. So I think that's pretty much what happened. But on whether palliatives are required, we're absolutely right. Nigerians have been suffering, and the increased prices has pretty much affected everything for them.
All right, before I let you go, Chukwuma, just about 2 minutes, I'll just tie two things together. Number one is, do you think that the prices will come down? There's been speculations that the price might come down because of course, the competition. And two, talking about the integration of the regulators, that is NUPRC, NMDPR, and of course, NCDMB. Those are the regulators. Now, integrating them into one single regulator, do you think that is also a wise decision to take? And do you think it will have any meaningful impact on the sector? Those two areas quickly. I need your response.
Well, quickly on pricing, I think the prices might come down if two conditions. Dangote comes on stream, the PHC refinery comes on stream. But it will come down marginally, because the economics that go into both the refining and the pricing are still a bit high. So, but I think ultimately the prices might come down marginally if more marketers come in and more refineries roll out in the short to medium term. So yes, I'm optimistic. It won't happen immediately, but in the next couple of years, I think it will come down marginally. On merging the institutions, what I would say in closing is this. We just passed the PIA, and the PIA has set out these institutions. Yes, it might be a good decision to merge them, but I think we shouldn't rush into doing that. One thing we need to be careful about is the signal we send out, not just locally, but to the international community. If you just pass the law and you have sort of introduced that settlement I talk about, and a couple of years after you change things, then people then begin to get jittery. So I think, yes, maybe there might be value in having a single point of contact with the regulator. So if you're an upstream or downstream player, you go to one person. It does seem to resonate, but I think we should be a bit careful in implementing it, and we should not, more importantly, should not be too hasty to implement it, so we do not begin to send conflicting signals to the market. That's pretty much how I see it.
All right, thank you so much, Chukwuma, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So with a concerted efforts that we are hoping will come on board, Nigeria's oil and gas sector can become a major contributor to the country's economy and, of course, growth and development. But then the PAC report has made it unequivocally clear that critical reforms are needed, and that is the only way we can have some sort of reprieve and help come by the way of the country's economy so that it can receive the massive boost that it has always been hoping for. And we'll hope that the recommendations being made by the PAC would be tenable and translatable into something positive for the energy industry in Nigeria. Let's quickly go on a short break, and when we return, it's time for international business stories. Do stay with us.